Hello and welcome back to the Strength Syndicate podcast after a very long hiatus with myself, Shane Storey, and my good friend Lawrence King. Lawrence, how are you?
How are you getting on? You're going to start bleeding maple syrup here any moment by the looks, yeah.
Pretty much, man. It's almost making up the full consistency of my blood. You know, I still have to get them checked properly post prep. I got my thyroid checked and I got my cholesterol checked, but I didn't get my maple syrup levels checked. So, yeah.
Oh, uh, I'd say like the likelihood of you turning diabetic over there is versus here is substantially higher. I don't know what were you eating for your breakfast there this morning? Was it fucking six fried eggs and a stack of pancakes as well?
Oh yeah, that was yesterday. That was actually my optimal post workout meal of three pancakes, stack of eggs, some sausages, some fried potatoes, and a stack of French toast as well. You know, after optimal post workout meal. Um,
There's, I hope none of that was fucking sarcastic. That sounds sheer and utterly optimal, really, to be honest with
of course,
you.
spice insulin, like that GLUT4 receptor.
If anybody really wants to see the big difference, they can go back to like the last one we did, and the difference in your face now versus then. Even you look like Skeletor the last time people would have seen you in this podcast capacity.
Yeah,
Um,
potentially though, because I think the last one we did was in April, so I wasn't full Skeletor then.
it was a
But yeah,
yeah.
I did some after my competition. So I did one with Brian Henglis and Dean on their podcast, and that
So
was
I
like a
think
week after my competition. So I was it's pretty much Skeletor. But I suppose we have a good bit to update people on because I mean, if you were just mentioned there about maple syrup making up part of my blood, so why the fuck would that be the case? Well, like I'm actually in Canada at the moment, so I immigrated to Canada last month. Um, no real kind of particular reason for it. Really, just get a change of scenery. You know,
those Dublin rents were getting to.
exactly. I think after finishing the bodybuilding prep, I kind of just needed I needed something to look forward to because that was essentially it made up the majority of my 2022, right? So like I made the transition from powerlifter to bodybuilder, and almost like a sex change within the two sports. And like that obviously throughout the entire year I had things to look forward to, had to look forward to like the first show, had to look forward to the international shows, going to LA, had to look forward to Christmas, and then like the toss of just having nothing to look forward to after Christmas and just going into like an off season. That
Yeah,
was that was honestly just like kind of scary. So we literally decided maybe in mid-October to decide to move to Canada, myself and Emma. So now we're here for like the next 2 years at least. That's how long our visa is going to be. And yeah, I suppose one of the reasons we actually chose here specifically is because there is this absolute super mega gym like in the area. It's called Pure Muscle and Fitness. If you are listening to this right now, you can search it on YouTube, and the guy who owns it, he has like an hour-long tour on his on his YouTube, just going through all the pieces of equipment. Like they have like 20 different types of leg press. They have like just everything. They have everything. They even have some like actual powerlifting power bars. They don't have calibrated plates, but you know that's a small artifact. Um, and then like a ton of IFBB pros trained there. Like there's a few people who compete at the Olympia. So you know if you go from training in somewhere like Abs, obviously, right, where you're training with the best powerlifters in Ireland,
yeah.
and as well like some there who are up there with the best in the world, and then you go to train in a bodybuilding gym where you literally have people who are like the 1%. You really kind of you keep yourself in the box, which is good.
Yeah, it's the abs effect though as well. That like at least you're used to just being around freaks. You're turning around and you look down one into the gym and you've Jake doing a 410 kilo double. You've Toaster then or fucking Keen, and you're it's very easy to keep your ego in check when you're around freaks all the time, and then you go over to another gym and you just have IFBB pros standing 20 feet away from you. Tell people the story about fucking, oh my god, who was it commenting on your delts in
Oh, Milo Sarchev.
fuck me, that's
Yeah.
uh,
Um,
it's
so if anybody knows Milo Sarchev, like he's Mr. Universe a few times, like one of the kind of the OG kind of Arnold era bodybuilders. And I was in the Dragon's Lair, which is in Las Vegas.
he was like a 90s bodybuilder, like he was, but he was right up there, like he had such a fucking stunning physique, but he's coached loads of pros,
Yeah.
hasn't he?
Yeah,
Uh,
he has. And like I'm so like not within like I just don't really kind of pay attention really to like bodybuilding as a sport in terms of like the famous people. I know like the top people in like the untested side, right? Or like the top people who have been there in the untested side. But I wasn't really kind of aware of him as such. And I was training in the Dragons there, which is Flex Luce's gym. He's a 7-time 2-on-2 Mr. Olympia. And your man Milo Sarchev there was there, and I was training with a guy who was competing at the same competition that we were doing there. He was like, "Oh, we get a picture with the legend," and I was like, "Okay, no problem." Like, so I just got a picture with him because I was like, "Okay, he's obviously somebody, he's somebody famous." And then it was only after that, like Emma was like, "Oh, that was Milo Sarchev," and I was like, "No way." And when we were in the middle of the training session, like I was absolutely shredded to the bone at this time. I was doing like an Arsenal lateral raise, and he comes over and he just starts patting my delt and he goes, "Good quality, good quality." And I was like, "Not bad." Yeah. It's weird though, because when you train like in gyms like that, like you kind of bump into these people that you see on social media. And I obviously met a lot of people that you would see on social media in terms of like high caliber bodybuilders over like the last like few months. And they're big, but like they're so much bigger on Instagram. In the same gym, I met your man Nick Walker, and like he's huge, but like I'm taller than him, you know. So like
and
just through
for frame reference, Shane is 5'3", so like that's
yeah, or even there was a ex Miss Olympia bikini, Jennifer Dory, and she was in the gym. She was like training beside me. I was like, she's in good nick, yeah. And then again came back home, and like Emma seen her pop up on the actual like on her story feed or something like that. She's like, she was in Dragon's Air. I was like, oh yeah, she's training beside me. No idea who she is. Like,
at least you were standing beside the former Miss Olympia, Miss Bikini winner, and you were like, "Oh no, at least my arms a little bigger."
yeah, I got a bigger kick out of meeting the Hodge twins. They were funnier to me. If anybody remembers the Hodge twins, they're like OG like fitness YouTubers back in the day. Now they are essentially just right wing conservatives.
Yeah, they've kind they've kind of gone down the rabbit hole. Uh, but what's the like biggest difference between Canada and America that you're kind of seeing so far, like with people or training or by your observations?
I think like that definitely went in the gym I'm training at the moment, like because it is almost so big, it's probably a little bit more clicky in a sense. Like there's a lot of people in the gym now who like are like I would say want to be influencers. A lot of people like that. Amongst a lot of the people who are like obviously like very well established in like bodybuilding. It's interesting, right? Because the guys who are obviously like at the top of the game in like the competitive side of bodybuilding, like they're going around the gym, like humble as, big baggy t-shirts, big kind of big pants in them, like just there working hard, working in silence, so have their headphones on. And then you have like a load of lads who are probably like in their early 20s or younger, like about 60 kilos soaking wet, walk around the gym with their tops off, like flexing in the mirror. And just like I am impressed with their level of confidence to be able to do that around such big
Highly.
people, like such high level people, you know. So like that's definitely one thing I've noticed. Like I probably wouldn't see that as much in an Irish gym. You certainly wouldn't get a lot of lads like taking off their shot tops in an Irish gym. You'd be yeah. I think I think it's far less common. Yeah, I suppose that's kind of the Irish mentality and such. Like, fucking stop being full of yourself there, will you?
Guilt.
Yeah. Um, but I think that like definitely for like I can only speak off the gym that I'm training in at the moment, but like obviously bodybuilding as such is seems to be far bigger like over here. Not naturally enough, right? Because I mean, if you have the facilities available and like there's obviously going to be more shows as well,
Yeah.
that's going to make the actual the feasibility of actually competing in bodybuilding or want to be a bodybuilder far more realistic. Because say for example, within Ireland, if you only have like a handful of shows a year, it's way less likely that you're really going to be able to commit to something long term because you also had to plan it out like a year in advance. Whereas like if there's a show on like every couple of weeks over here, like you can essentially kind of jump into a prep with a
Yeah,
little less planning, you know?
I'd agree with you. And I think even a consideration is about like visibility. I think when I think about like the growth of bodybuilding, it's kind of in the UK, I think is a really good example to where it's nearly like a snowball effect. So if you like in a gym, if you have a couple of high level bodybuilders, and if everyone is coming in that gym, and all of a sudden it's like he's from my area, he's like his family are kind of, it's similar kind of background to me. Like younger lads can kind of model that and be like, right, this fella does this in training, he eats this, and then eventually a bodybuilding culture kind of permeates into that gym and eventually into that area. Like I mean, if you look at the UK, like where bodybuilding is taken off,
Yeah.
like a couple of guys winning their pro cards kind of started that off. So I mean, like in Canada, kind of, and Ireland, I suppose or the discrepancy here, I suppose, could be like where we are getting a couple of more high level lads. It might eventually come to prominence, but
Mm.
in like Canada, I suppose they're so close to America, it would be kind of hard not to imagine the bodybuilding would be. And I suppose more of a mainstay in gym culture would it be than powerlifting.
Yeah, like there is a powerlifting gym in this area that I'm in, but it's a little bit kind of smaller. Like the gym itself will be not even not even a quarter of the size of the gym that I'm currently training in, And even like within the gym I'm in, like there is a handful of powerlifters, but it wouldn't be the norm as such, you know. Um, because I think powerlifting it almost flourishes a little bit more when you do have that kind of community kind of club like kind of spirit behind it, as opposed to it being like an individualistic kind of
Yeah,
sport, because you can see that like with the likes of all the clubs that are based in Ireland, but then as well more kind of successful clubs like around the world as well. Like generally, people will be training within a gym together as opposed to like just going to the gym with like your training buddy and training for a powerlifting meet.
100%. So speaking of the P word there, have you any competition plans this year? I know you're kind of thereabouts thinking about it. Was it a USAPL comp maybe?
Yeah, probably thinking about doing a powerlifting American competition now because with the whole kind of rigmarole with the IPF and USAPL, it probably wouldn't be the smartest thing to compete in the USAPL. I think I'd actually get banned if I compete in the USAPL. So
Fuck you.
sorry.
Like, fuck you. The less you involved in powerlifting, the better.
Yeah. But I think there is a powerlifting America in Buffalo, which is an hour drive from me in July, which I think I'm gonna aim to build for because I want a lot of time to build. Like the last few weeks of training have went really well because my body weight has gotten back up to in and around where I'd like it to be comfortably to kind of make some kind of progressions in strength. So like the next few blocks are going to be kind of me seeing how close essentially to my best ever like training lifts I can get or even beyond them. But it will require a good few months before I can get to like my best ever kind of meet kind of performance, you know. So that's essentially the kind of trajectory that I'm looking to work on. And I mean, if it gets to the point where I'm like 6 to 8 weeks out from competition and I'm just don't think I am where I want to be, I can always extend the actual training until like the end of the year and compete then, because I don't really have a rush to compete. Like competing takes a lot of time out of your actual entire training year as such.
Yeah.
So I prefer to kind of accumulate more kind of progressive training than just test for the sake of testing, you know?
That makes sense. And I think, like, even like we always say to each other, like during a peak, your volume is so low and your intensity is so high, it's not really conducive, like you said, of much progression or much, like if you're looking to add on a bit of tissue, 6 or 8 weeks of a peak where you're not really doing anything substantial in your accessories or anything isn't really conducive of what you're trying to do, I suppose, is it?
Yeah, that's very true. Like, because like even if you think, if we consider that'd be 6 weeks out from middle of July, so that we essentially be until from now until May, I'd have like some kind of progressive training, you know, which
Yeah,
is what, 3 months,
yeah,
you know. So if I was going to pull the trigger, I would want to essentially be within, you know, less than 5% of like my best ever total, you know. What about yourself? I know you've been dealing with some issues in your
yeah.
tissues.
A lot of issues in my tissues. So I kind of have like an ongoing hip thing that I was trying to rehab my way out of, and it just wasn't rehabbing. I wasn't able to rehab my way out of it. So the the general consensus from any of the physios I've gone to, or any of the staff in the college I work, we were all kind of saying the same thing, with that it was some kind of proximal hamstring tendinopathy. The only issue with the hamstring tendinopathy is that it didn't really fit into the box of being like a classic hamstring tendinopathy. It was kind of presenting as it, um, but it wasn't really responding to any of the rehab. So I was rehabbing it for so long. Then there was kind of a case that it could have been a nerve, but it didn't really give any of the symptoms of it being nerve. So went to a consultant at Aina Falvey in Cork. Really nice guy. He kind of went through the MRI with me. So kind of what's happened is that at the back of your hip, there's your femur sits in your hip. And that back portion of the pelvis where your femur sits in, there's a tear in the cartilage, and that's causing some fluid into the femur. So I've edema of the bone marrow in my femur. Not really the best the best news I was expecting walking in. And essentially the consultant was like, can't really do anything here, but rest it up. So we've dropped all hinging really, bar I'm doing one or realistically doing one loading set a week on squats and one loading week a set on deadlifts. So it's extremely low. So I'll just work up to maybe a top single on deadlifts and a top double on deadlifts or squats, and that's my lower body volume for the week. I'm doing some kind of leg extensions and leg curls with a pretty high frequency at moderate RPs. But again, it's like I'm doing those maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And then upper body is kind of as normal, but I had really, really hoped to get back on the platform this year, but it's looking fairly unlikely. So the next plan would be to get an MRA. That's kind of nearly like a 4K MRI, like a HD MRI. So they'll put in some dye into the capsule of my hip, and they'll be able to kind of differentiate a little bit better between the tissues with that dye in there. So that's the next point. That's about 6 or 7 weeks away now. After that, I don't know. Are we looking at surgery? Is it just a case that they'll do arthroscopy of the hip, where they'll fill the hip with fluid, um, pop a camera in there, see what the story is, and will it be a case that they clean up the cartilage? Will they do a steroid injection? Will it be that they'll drain the fluid from the femur and do a little bit of both? I don't know. So when I have more, I'll let you all know. When I say ye, I say that. I don't know, that sounded a bit fucking rotten there. When, as if anyone listens, it's just going to be Connor Kieran listening to this again. But yeah, if Connor's listening, but yeah, so I'm squat. I'm not a million miles off, baseline baseline numbers. Like I did 200 today for a double, and it's sore. It is painful, but it's reasonable weight to be moving with the prospect of surgery ahead of me. So I'm kind of in my head. This has been going on for so long that if it got operated on, I knew there was a good chance of success. I'm fairly confident that when I would get back squatting, I'd be moving fairly well. Uh, deadlifts are like deadlifting is agony at the moment. Like it's as I get into any kind of extension, it it feels like someone's in like pinching my femur is the only way, or the head of my hip is the only way I can describe it. And it's kind of like like a cold pinching sensation. So yeah, so that's zero crack. But I'd be kind of like, supposedly with this hip scope, it's about a 6 week ish turnaround. So I was going into that, I'd be doing loads of prehab, getting everything around the hip as strong as I can. And then you'd be kind of 6 weeks of no movement or no pressure on the hip. So I'd be like, obviously I'd be in crutches or whatever. I wouldn't be fucking doing a whole post op. But yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at then, with training. Work wise then, for me, I suppose I've started coaching with abs, which is nice. Thank you, Jeff Arndt, for giving me a job. Much obliged. Hopefully then, so we kind of got news that our PhD funding is due to run out in sometime in September, so it's going to be sweaty enough trying to get this last intervention done and written up by end of September and hopefully submitted around then. So yeah, those are kind of my main updates.
I think it's gonna be. I think it'd be interesting enough over like the course of like the next year, because like obviously like, well, we're not in the complete same situation. We're in similar situations. So like you're going through like an injury at the moment. Like you don't necessarily have an end point as to when it's going to be completely better, but you are going to be on a trajectory of kind of rebuilding yourself essentially back to kind of powerlifting, and like that's kind of a similar kind of ballpark to me. So I'm going from being obviously emaciated to trying to get strong again, right? So like one thing I'll ask you is like, how have you kind of dealt with that news, like mentally? Because obviously, like powerlifting and kind of strength training can like take up so much of your time and so much of like your kind of thought process in terms of like your goals. And naturally enough, like when that kind of gets taken away from you a bit, like how do you kind of how do you kind of overcome that kind of little bit of kind of struggle that you would face?
Yeah, I think I think I'm very lucky with my work, outside of powerlifting, because like you and I would talk about this a lot. With powerlifting and bodybuilding, it's so deep within the culture to become so unidimensional that the lines between the powerlifter and you become so blurred. So for me, like as a powerlifter, it's like like when I started powerlifting, I knew I was never going to be like an all-time world record holder. I was never, no one was ever going to be like, he is a great powerlifter. Like I knew I could get better and maybe in a few years, maybe push into pro-am or something like that in abs. But like for me, powerlifting, like a hobby I took seriously and a hobby I love, but it's a hobby. And I think that's where I'm kind of lucky that I'm doing a PhD. I do strength and conditioning with a couple of GA teams. We are like be heavily involved in running exercise interventions for older adults. So like I've a lot outside of powerlifting, and I've a lot of like relationships that like friends that aren't remotely involved in powerlifting, and I'm like I suppose times like this I feel very very fortunate um for I suppose making that conscious decision to try and separate myself out from that sport. And that actually happened when I was bodybuilding, because I kind of like I was never really a great bodybuilder, but I was actively trying to bodybuild, and I kind of found the deeper and deeper into it I went anyway for me, the harder it was to try and come out of the sport. So I kind of finished up my undergrad and I was like, right, I can't be in a situation where the lines, my own identity is that I was a bodybuilder. I do bodybuilding. I eat like a bodybuilder. Um, so as cringy as it kind of sounds, a little bit of like figuring out how I wanted to map out the next 5 or 10 years of my life, and kind of having things outside of lifting weights and in the gym was important. Like it's small stupid things like going golfing, having friends to play golf. Like it's like in loads of other sports, rugby, soccer, lads go golfing because they can see there's an end point to their sport. I think that's very important for young powerlifters and anyone that's new into the sport, is to keep unless you're potentially going to be elite level, and it's maybe worthwhile investing a little bit more time in it. I think keeping the hobby is the hobby, and like a worthwhile hobby, like fuck me, the lessons you learn from powerlifting will are heavily transferable um across tasks. But it's kind of it's nice to think back to myself maybe 2 or 3 years ago, that I was preemptive of something happening, and then all of a sudden you don't know who you are, or you don't know what you are, because you can't powerlift. Like I'm potentially looking at maybe another 9 months to a year away from platform, and like it's miserable because I want to compete. It's like I'm 26, like in theory, or you're kind of not coming into your prime, but like you should be at a point where you're steadily progressing. And like it is frustrating, it is disheartening, but it's not to the point where my mental health is suffering as a consequence. So yeah, like I mean, it's a it's a kick in the teeth, and you want to lift heavy because it feels good. Like there's no two ways around it. Like there's uh there's such a, we all like, you look at your sheet and there's a top set down, or you've 240 for a treble, or you've 260 for a treble, or you whatever number to hit, and then you hit it, and then you end up rewatching that video 8 times that day, and you don't even realize you're doing it. But there is in overcoming that task, there is such a reward, whatever little dopamine receptors all powerlifters have in their head, but it really does set off that kind of reward system. And fuck me, like you do miss it. But like, I mean, I can progress other things. I don't know, become some kind of bench specialist or something. So yeah, so that's my rant. If anyone ever finds themselves in a similar situation, or not finds themselves in a similar situation. But my only advice would be for powerlifters to maybe assess themselves and see how much of their lives revolve around the sport, and maybe try and get another hobby, like, I don't know, taking photos or golf or flying kites, whatever the kids do these days.
Yeah, I'm very grateful that I actually took so long to get into like competitive powerlifting, because it gave me so much time in like my early 20s to do things that weren't related to training at all. Like when I was in my early 20s, like I was like training, but like I was so much more I was so much more interested in like, partying every weekend. Like I was big into, like, I still am big into music, but I was like big into like house and techno, and like I DJ'd. Like I started DJing when I was like probably in 6th year of school, all the way till I finished in university. And like that was something that was like a major hobby for me, and I gained a lot of experiences through doing that. Like got to like DJ like lots of different cool places and nightclubs, like fucking after raves in different countries. Like when I went on to my J1, I actually DJ'd some random 4th of July party on like on Pacific Beach that I wasn't meant to do. I just like went up and told your man that I had decks, and he's like, "Oh, bring your decks and fucking DJ that." And like I DJ'd a few nightclubs over in San Diego as well, which is like unreal experiences. But I never would have really got that if like the most important thing in my life right then was training. Whereas like training and this kind of stuff, it's obviously like really important, but it can be important later on in your life. Like I don't think when you're young, even like I don't think necessarily I'm not trying to promote the fact that you should be going out partying more, but like have some kind of other aspect to your interests, and don't pigeonhole yourself so early. Because if you become a specialist in like anything, even in terms of like your career too early on, it really leaves you with like very low prospects later on in life. Like that's kind of like one of the reasons why like even when I was in college, say for example, I did business, because business, it doesn't train you to be specifically really good at any one thing, but it gives you a really kind of broad understanding of loads of different kind of concepts. And I suppose obviously there's lots of kind of tangible skills that you learn through university that you're not necessarily going to learn elsewhere. But if I went into, I don't know, biomedical, fucking cancer, something like, something extremely hyper specialized, then the skills and things I learned through that like would be so inapplicable in other aspects of life. So it's kind of similar with like sports, powerlifting, bodybuilding. Like you can choose a lot of different things and try to kind of form different kind of parts of your identity that don't necessarily need to have you become this like unidimensional person.
Yeah.
As
Even
as
I think,
Lauren said, like if you get an injury or a big setback and that gets taken away from you, like I know guys who literally like they're living 10, 20 years in the past of like the bodybuilder that they used to be, and like now they are not in a good position in terms of mental health, and they just talk about like they're the bygone days, right? And like that's like you don't want to be that person that you bump into in the gym that's like, I used to bench 180 kilos, and it's like, well, maybe don't. you know um because yeah.
I think it's I can't remember where on Instagram I saw it or who I saw saying this, but like being a really good generalist in our area at least, and I think kind of like particularly when it comes to like hobbies and things like that, like having having interests outside of powerlifting, like read books, go to the cinema with your missus, go to a museum when you're away, find things that you find interesting outside of watching people with neurodivergent people screaming in gyms lifting heavy weights. It's there is more to it, but yeah, no, I'm kind of hoping then for the summer to be kind of focused on getting PhD finished, getting out, putting fucking Dr. King in the Instagram bio,
Nice.
finishing up with finishing up a team. So like my day job outside of the PhD and coaching powerlifters is doing strength and conditioning with GA teams. So kind of this phase of the season, we're just doing kind of more of the volume kind of stuff, like longer aerobic stuff. Obviously, still exposing them to some high speed sprint work, but trying to build foundations, build strength, and try and get them to fill out the extra medium jerseys coming into league. So yeah, so like my summers probably going to be spent mainly coaching, because we're looking at me and Connor are looking at running an intervention over the summer as well. So I'll probably have 60 to 70 older adults involved in that, involved in another kind of resistance training study. So yeah, busy. What are your plans then, kind of work wise, for the remainder of 2023?
Work wise, like I have a good few more people now I've got a good few powerlifters on like my client base, which is fantastic, because I'm always looking to try to expand, or dip my toes in there further. Try to get, I think I have my toes in. I think I want to get up to like waist deep or something like that, so I have a good few powerlifters competing in like the likes of the upcoming ab series, some nutrition clients as well, with the likes of like nationals. So yeah, working with more kind of specific people with those kind of bases, as well as we've got a guy who is going to be doing a men's physique competition in Dubai, of all places, in September, which is going to be pretty cool to start prepping people for those type of shows. Because I mean, like that was like one of the reasons as well that I did prep last year, right? Was because I want to coach more people who have like bodybuilding aspirations, and like nobody's going to go to somebody for bodybuilding coaching who has never stepped on stage before. And I hope the fact that I stepped on stage 6 times last season would help get me some kind of social kind of credit within that kind of community, to get more kind of clients in that kind of aspect.
Yeah, a bit of street cred.
Essentially, yeah. So like that's kind of like the kind of main kind of goal as well for this year, is to get more kind of people, not necessarily to compete this year within bodybuilding, but definitely next year. Like I want, if people are going to be coming on at this stage, I'd want them to be coming on for like off seasons, because I think now if you're coming to a coach that you've never worked with, and I don't know how well their kind of systems in terms of like their habits are, I wouldn't necessarily feel too confident in coaching them to stage condition, because it is tough to get there, right? Like I think last year when I applied, like I applied to 3DMJ in the kind of same position, like around the same kind of time this year. But like I'd done so many diets before in the past, I knew there was going to be zero issue with me doing a prep. I've been through the initial diets where you're trying to kind of form your kind of diet habits. I've been through diets where, on the back end of it, end up binge eating. So I've been through all of that. So, this time around, it was going to be a lot more consistent coming out of the back of it. Like, I was going to be in a much kind of better position mentally to actually kind of commit to the prep. And it's going to be way less. There's going to be way less kind of, not necessarily deviation from the plan, but way less issue. Like I'd say, like last year, compared to what I've heard of other people doing preps, I thought it was pretty handy. I thought it was pretty easy. I'm not like, obviously there was tough days, right? But like having listened to people talk about preps, like on podcasts before, be like, this is the hardest thing you'll ever do. Like it was difficult, right? It was lengthy, right? I think the length of time that took was the toughest part.
Yeah.
But I don't think, I don't know. I think because I had done so many diets leading up to that, I was so familiarized with the actual experience of like being hungry, doing stuff you don't necessarily want to do, but you still need to do them. I think that was fine. That was fine.
Do you think your lifestyle, I suppose, that like you being an online coach, not being involved in like physical labor or having a long commute to work or anything, was the tide was kind of in your favor in that sense?
Of course, yeah, definitely. But I mean, like that is one of the kind of main things that you will kind of discuss with people when it does come to like an achieving a goal. Like, how is your environment and lifestyle set up to achieve that goal. Because like if I was in a position where, you know, my life stress was through the roof, I was in a toxic relationship, you know, I had a job that I fucking hated, like that would make prepping so much more difficult, especially if it was like a menial job, right? So say for example, like my job, I'm doing check-ins or like making content throughout the day, and like, because I work for myself, I can essentially just give myself stuff to do. But if I was working in a job where, like, you know, we go in 9 to 5, and you know, I hate my boss, job is really menial, like I could essentially spend a lot of that day just getting through my tasks and like thinking about food, thinking about the next meal, because that's the most exciting part of my day, you know. And then as well with like with a relationship, obviously having Emma and somebody who was prepping as well with me, picking up, that made life so much easier because we were both dieting. None of us were getting takeaways. We did our steps together. You know, there was nothing in the house that was going to make us fall off track. You know, if one of us was feeling demotivated, the other one just gave a kick up the arse, you know. So it was like my environment was completely set up in perfect position for me to succeed, you know. So like that's obviously one of the reasons why it was so easy. But I can see why it would be a lot more difficult if you had things in your lifestyle not as well set up. But that's a conversation that you do need to have with people who are getting into those things, because that side almost needs to be as kind of solid as, like, you know, your dietary habits. Because like say for example, if you have friends, family members, or a relationship that like don't get what you're trying to do, that is, and you're almost trying to like be a people pleaser or trying to hide that for them, or you're not communicating how serious your kind of goals are, your commitment is to your goals, they're not going to understand like why you need to weigh out your food, like, you know, at a family occasion. They're not going to necessarily need to understand why you can't decide to just like relax and have a couple of drinks. Like even like 2 weeks out from my first show, like one of my friends had a 30th birthday and I hadn't seen her in like years, and like I went to the 30th, like I went to the 30th for like a couple of hours, and like usually this with like friends I'd usually be like on it with, right? And I just had to say to him, look, this is really important, but showing up to this event is obviously really important to me too, but I do have to make kind of sacrifices. Like,
Yeah.
you know, the drinking is going to be there at the end of my prep, you know, but it's important to kind of communicate that and kind of stick true to your goal, essentially, you know.
Oh, that makes sense. That's pretty much us, I think, updated, really, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. So hopefully we're going to be getting these podcasts out a little bit more frequently than every 8 months. So myself and Lawrence just plan to meet here every once a week and just shoot the shit. And if we have guests on, we'll have guests on. So that's pretty much it. So if you enjoyed our rambles today, make sure to share the podcast on social media. Give us a like on Spotify, a like on the podcast app on Apple, and we'll chat to you next week.